Can someone confirm if they can see the slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, so let's begin. So today we'll be going over pointers, arrays, loops, and then a few common mistakes you should look out for when you're coding. And then at the end, we are going to have a small example question, practice question about loops. Okay, so for pointers, when will the recording be available? It's going to be available as soon as the tutorial's over. Acha, so for pointers, a pointer is a variable whose value is the memory address of the variable it points to. So you can think of the variable as being a box that's kept somewhere. And जैसे एक घर के कमरे में एक डब्बा रखा हुआ है, that's your variable. And then the pointer is going to be a variable जो आपको बता रहा है कि वो डब्बा कौन से कमरे में रखा हुआ है. So what room that box is in, उसकी value is in your pointer. To initialize your pointer, there's this simple syntax. It's the same syntax used whenever you're going to use any pointer. It could be a pointer to a variable that's an integer. It could be a pointer to a variable that's a string, a character, a boolean, whatever it is. This is how you're going to initialize. So you're going to have the data type and then an asterisk. So data type mein there's either an int, a string, a char. Pointer ka naam, it could be whatever you want to keep it. And then this equals to sign, and then we have this ampersand symbol. This ampersand signal is known as the referencing operator. And so जैसे आप नीचे देख सकते हैं, this ampersand operator is going to give you the memory address of a particular variable. And कौन सा वाले variable? It's the variable that comes after the ampersand towards the right side. So for example, अगर हम, if we can take a look at the code at the bottom, we have the variable string and then day scholar access, and then its value is closed. To make a pointer that points to this variable, if you compare the second line with the initialization, data type mein we have string, and then we have the asterisk. Pointer name mein we've named our pointer pane, and then equals to sign, ampersand, day scholar access. And so the day scholar access is your variable in this case, and then the ampersand sign is going to give you the memory address. Okay, so yahan tak is everyone with me? Does anyone have any questions about this? Ahmed, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, do we have to declare the variable before we set, like basically declare its pointer?
Acha, so that's a good question. So a pointer basically points towards the memory address of a particular variable. If you've never declared the variable in the first place, you'll have nothing to get the memory address for. So a pointer is always made after you've declared your variable. Does that clarify your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Acha, so moving on, to get the value, so the pointer hota hai, that gives you the memory address of a particular variable that you're pointing towards. If you see out the pointer, तो जैसे हमने pointer बनाया था pen का, if you see out the pointer, it's going to give you the memory address of the variable it's pointing to. However, if you want the value of the variable that's being pointed towards, you're going to use the dereferencing operator, which is the asterisk. Now you may be confused about this because we've used an asterisk upper initialize karte hue, and we're also using it in this example. Now these are two different scenarios where we're using the pointer, the asterisk. Once it's used for initialization, this format, this syntax always stays the same. But whenever you want the value of the variable you're pointing towards, you're going to use the asterisk और फिर आप pointer का नाम आगे लिख देंगे. So in our case, we had the pointer pane, and then when we put a star symbol besides it to the left of it, we are going to get the value of the variable day scholar access, which is again closed, as you can see pehli line se. what is the address of the variable? So that depends. Address कुछ भी हो सकता है. Address could, so आपके memory stack में you can have your variable कहीं पे भी, उसकी value कुछ भी हो सकती है. It could be 0x9FED. It could be anything. But that's not our concern right now. Our concern is the fact that a pointer, if you output the pointer, it's going to give you the memory address, whatever it may be. But if you use the asterisk besides the pointer name, you're going to get the value of the variable it's pointing towards. So anyone have any questions? You could raise your hand. No? Okay. Taimur, मुझे बता देना if someone raises their hands, I can see it.
ठीक है बता दो।
Okay. So now we move on to the second part. So once you know how to initialize a pointer, you know how to use the pointer, how to output the pointer, we come to the second part of using the pointers in a function. So the first thing we're going to discuss is pointers as parameters to your function. तो अगर आपको याद होगा functions जो हैं उनको अगर आपने initialize करना होता है, you have this syntax. So it's return type function name, and then in your brackets you could have whatever parameter you want. Return type में we have void, int, string, bool, आपकी मर्जी है. Function name में again it's your choice, and then in the brackets, in the parentheses, you have your parameter. If you want to use a pointer in your parameter, you're going to have the following syntax: data type star and then pointer name. So data type again in character string, and then pointer name mein whatever you'd like. Now you'll notice that this syntax, data type star pointer name, is very similar to the syntax we used when we were declaring the pointer. It's the same thing. So if you're ever forgetting it, just go back to the slide and know that it's the same thing. So if you want to see an example for this line, you can look at the following code at the bottom. Usme we have int as our return type for the function. The function name is example underscore function. And then the pointer that we are passing as a parameter, that is int star function parameter. ये जो function parameter है, this is a pointer. If you want to use the previous example, in that case, our pointer was pain. So यहाँ पे function parameter की जगह we could have written pain as well. Okay. So once you have a function declared for a pointer, you need to pass a value for it from the main function. So आपका function ऊपर declare हुआ है और main में you want to call the function. How you're going to call the function is in the following way. आपने यहाँ पे एक variable initialize कर लिया box. It's an integer with a value of 10. You create a pointer using this syntax. So int star and then the pointer name is equals to ampersand and then the variable name. So ampersand box. So ये जो box pointer है, this is going to give you the memory address of the variable box. And now we are going to call the function from main. So as you know from CS100, function name, and then in parentheses, you're going to pass the argument. In our argument, we want to pass the pointer. So the pointer we've made was box pointer. Alternatively, you could also just directly send the memory address of your variable box by using ampersand box. तो ज़रूरी नहीं है कि आप pointer पहले बनाएं और फिर function में भेजें. You could also directly use the ampersand and then the variable name. It does the same thing. So these are two ways through which you could pass your pointer from main to a function. Does anyone have any questions on this? Abdullah, go ahead.
अच्छा, मैंने पूछा था कि ये दोनों केसेस में हम एड्रेस भेज रहे हैं, फर्स्ट वाले फंक्शन में भी और सेकंड में भी.
अच्छा, so जो आपका सवाल है कि if you're sending memory address or not, जो पॉइंटर होता है ना, जैसे मैंने इस वाली स्लाइड में आपको दिखाया था, अगर आप एक पॉइंटर को आउटपुट करते हैं ना, आपको एक मेमोरी एड्रेस मिलता है एक वेरिएबल का। तो जब हम फंक्शन के अंदर पॉइंटर भेज रहे हैं ना, वी आर एसेंशियली जस्ट सेंडिंग द मेमोरी एड्रेस। तो या तो आप पॉइंटर बना के भेज सकते हैं या आप डायरेक्टली भेज सकते हैं एम्परसैंड बॉक्स करके। इट्स गोइंग टू सेंड यू द सेम मेमोरी एड्रेस। समझ आ गया?
एक मिनट, एक और क्वेश्चन है कि जिस तरह आपने वो अंदर जो फंक्शन का पैरामीटर है वो लिखा है इंटीजर और आगे एस्टेरिस्क का एक सिंबल लगाया है,
जी।
तो उसके आगे फिर हम जब बॉक्स पार्ट लिखते हैं तो फिर उसकी मतलब अभी वो मेमोरी एड्रेस जा रहा है या फिर उसकी वेरिएबल की वैल्यू जा रही है? क्योंकि जब एस्टेरिस्क लगा के आगे पॉइंटर का नाम लिखते हैं तो फिर तो वेरिएबल की वैल्यू जाती है ना, फंक्शन नहीं जाती।
जी, तो ये आपका दूसरा वाला पॉइंट सही था। पहले वाले पॉइंट में आप इसकी बात कर रहे हैं, इंट स्टार फंक्शन पैरामीटर।
जी जी।
नहीं, अच्छा। सो जब आप एक फंक्शन, ये पैरामीटर बना रहे हैं फंक्शन का, तो अगर आपको याद है, पॉइंटर को जब हम डिक्लेयर करते हैं ना, हम इस तरह डिक्लेयर करते हैं, डेटा टाइप स्टार पॉइंटर नेम। ये हम डिक्लेयर करते हुए कर रहे हैं। जब हम आगे डिक्लेयर करके प्रोग्राम में यूज करेंगे स्टार और फिर वेरिएबल पॉइंटर का नाम, तो फिर उसकी वैल्यू आएगी। जब हम इनिशियलाइज करेंगे तब वी आर क्रिएटिंग द पॉइंटर, डेटा टाइप स्टार पॉइंटर नेम। सो इन आवर केस वी डन डेटा टाइप स्टार पॉइंटर नेम। तो ये वाला पार्ट और ये वाला पार्ट दे आर द सेम। एक दफ़ा इनिशियलाइज कर लें आप अपना वेरिएबल, उसके बाद जब आप स्टार पॉइंटर नेम यूज़ करेंगे फिर आपको वैल्यू मिलेगी वेरिएबल की। शुरू में इट्स यूज्ड टू डिक्लेयर द पॉइंटर। तो we have two cases where we're using the asterisk. One is declaring the variable and one is dereferencing the variable. Dereferencing का मतलब होता है वैल्यू निकालना। समझ आ गया?
जी ठीक है, थैंक यू।
ओके। सो दानिश, जो आपने सवाल पूछा है मेमोरी एड्रेस फंक्शन में भेजना, सो यू बेसिकली आस्किंग पॉइंटर का फ़ायदा क्या है। we'll get to that right now. So why do we have to use pointers if we have access to the variables themselves? तो basically हमने box pointer क्यों भेजा function में when we directly have the variable box? So there are a few cases why we would want to do that. So सबसे पहले तो using a pointer is going to save memory. That's because if you remember from CS100, there are two ways of passing a variable to a function, either by reference or by value. When we send a variable by value, तो फिर it's literally creating a new copy of the variable to send to the function. तो मतलब you're doubling on memory used because you have to copy the variable. When you pass by reference, you're just passing the memory address. So directly what you're passing in the function is, अच्छा ये वाला variable, it's in this place in my computer, just access this instead of creating a whole new copy. A pointer essentially is doing the same thing. You're passing the memory address to your function, and so you don't have to copy the variable as well. And so it saves memory space. Execution time is faster when you're using a pointer because again, data is manipulated with the address, क्योंकि उसके पास directly पता है उसको कि memory में पड़ा हुआ कहाँ है, instead of creating the copy. They're useful for making 2D and multiple dimensional arrays. Yeah, you're going to learn this in a few weeks in the course, okay, how to make 3D arrays, 4D arrays using pointers. And then pointers are used for file handling. अगर आपको file handling का इतना पता नहीं है, that's fine. So pointers are passed by reference, not necessarily. The concept behind them is the same thing. Okay, you're just passing the memory address. You're not passing the variable itself. तो जिस तरह मैंने आपको बताया था, when you output a pointer, it's going to give you the memory address, and that could be something like 0x38282213, depends. So यहाँ पे pointers का ख़त्म हो जाता है the theory part. Does anyone have any questions before I move on to an example code? Okay, so this is one of the tasks from the lab for section 2. In this, you're going to take two integers and then you're going to swap them using pointers. तो a में जो value है वो b में रख दो, जो b में है वो a में रख दो. But you can't do it directly. You have to use pointers. If you were able to do this in the lab, chances are you didn't need this tutorial. But if you can't, so try following along. So int main में we are going to input two integers. So one is called the first number और फिर दूसरा वाला is the second number. And then you're going to create two pointers for the two variables. So ये जो this syntax that we used, data type star pointer name is equals to ampersand variable pointed at, we're using that. So int star pointer name is equals to ampersand first number. Again, int star second pointer is equals to ampersand second number. So if you're confused, first pointer or second pointer mein, we have the memory addresses for first number and second number. We don't have the values, we have the memory address. Okay. So now we are going to call our swap function. तो swap function ऊपर अगर आप देख सकते हैं, so the swap function, उसके parameter में it has two pointers, first and second. Int star first and int star second are ways to initialize your pointers, जिस तरह we used 2 slides ago, जिस तरह data type star pointer name. So int star first and int star second. And this is just a basic swapping algorithm. We're using star and then the pointer name because this gives us the value of the variable we're pointing towards. It's different from जो हमने यहाँ पे int star first लिखा है. These stars, asterisks, they have different uses. यहाँ पे it's used to initialize the pointer, और यहाँ पे it's used to dereference the pointer or get the value of the variable it's pointing towards. So the value in first is equals to the value pointed to first plus the value pointed to second, and then you can follow along with the code. By the time we return, and if you notice, the function type is void because जिस तरह हम pass by reference करते हैं, you're passing the memory address. So any changes you make in the function, they're going to be reflected in the main as well. जिस तरह we use pass by reference. तो directly memory में आप change कर रहे हैं उसकी value. Okay, so dereferencing. So just we have a pointer. I'll go back. Acha. So we have a pointer. We have a pointer pane. This is pointing to the memory address of day scholar access. अब आप देखें day scholar access की जो value है that's closed. जो pointer है pane, this is pointing to the memory address of day scholar access. If we want to know कि day scholar access के अंदर कौन सी value है जो closed है, we could do that through our pointer using the asterisk. So asterisk variable name is going to give us closed. इसके output में closed आएगा. Because pane is pointing towards the variable day scholar access, when we use the asterisk beside the pointer name, it's going to give us the value of day scholar access. I know that's too many words. I hope you've understood. If you've not, then you can ask again. Okay. Okay, so by the time you return to the main function, your values would have been swapped, and that's the end of the program. So basically, day scholar access and asterisk pane will give the same output. Yes, they will. और उसका answer closed होगा. Okay, so Temur is going to continue the tutorial on arrays.
Okay, so basically why we're covering arrays is some people who've taken CS 100 in the summers, they didn't cover arrays then, so we thought it would be useful to introduce arrays right now. And if you have covered arrays, you can revise them right now, so it's a good opportunity for you to revise. Now, an array is just a container that stores the same type of values. Okay, so if you have multiple values of the same type, you don't need to create many variables, many separate variables to store them. Okay? So you can store them in an array. Now, for example, let's say you want to store the CS 200 lab marks for 100 students, okay? So instead of making 100 integer variables, you can just make one single array and you can store all of the grades over here. And another example I can give you is like a library bookshelf. Okay, so you have a separate bookshelf for math books, a separate bookshelf for history books, a separate one for law books, and etc. So the same type of data type you can store in contiguous memory, which I'll get to later, in an array. Now you can initialize an array using यार इब्राहिम मुझे स्क्रीन शेयर दे दो, मेरा माउस यहाँ पे नजर नहीं आएगा इनको ना.
अच्छा ठीक है, I'll stop sharing. कर लो share.
अच्छा नजर आ रही है स्क्रीन सबको?
हाँ.
ठीक है. So you write the data type which you want to store in the array. So over here we have integer, just for an example. Then you have the name of the array. So I've named it ARR. And then there are multiple ways to tell the compiler the size of the array. So for example, you can just write it in square brackets. You can say I want to store 10 integers. So you can write 10 in the square brackets. Or if you're initializing the
तैमूर आपकी स्लाइड्स नहीं दिख रही हैं और उस पे स्टक हुआ हुआ है LMS पर ही.
LMS पे क्यों stuck हो गए? एक मिनट.
हाँ, आप उस पे शेयर करो, वापस रीशेयर करो.
अच्छा एक मिनट मैं आ रहा हूँ. अब आ रहा है नजर?
हाँ, आप सही पर.
Yes.
अच्छा, तो मैं रिपीट करता हूँ. So for initializing an array, you have to tell the compiler the data type. So for example, in the picture we have an integer array. So I've written int. Then you tell the compiler the name of the array. It can be any name. So I've called it ARR over here. And then you have to tell the compiler the size of the array, which means how many elements you'll be storing in the array. So you can write that in square brackets and just put the size in between. Now there's also another way, and it's a common way as well, this one. So if you're initializing the array on the spot, that means as soon as you're declaring it, you don't necessarily need to tell the compiler the size, because C++ is smart enough to reduce the size from the list you give it, from the array you give it. So C++ will know, okay, I have to allocate 10 blocks of memory for this array. But if you want to take input from the user later for the array, yeah, you want to do some changes later, so it's better to use this notation so that the size is defined by you and not by the compiler itself. You can use this initialization for an empty array. So when you want to fill the array using a for loop later, you can use this. Now the problem with arrays is their size is fixed, right? So like the library bookshelf example I gave you, imagine you have a very specific bookshelf. Okay, so you get it custom made from somewhere. It has slots which only fit a particular type of book. So in my example, I'm going to go with CS books. Okay, I've got a shelf made which only stores CS books. Now I need to know how many books I'll be storing on that shelf before I get it made, right? It could be I want 100 books, but I've only ordered a bookshelf that can fit 50 books. So that's a problem, right? One way you can overcome this is by declaring a large size for the array. So you tell the person who's making the shelf, कि यार ज़रा बड़ा सा shelf बना दो, and then you can store any number of books on it you like. So right now I've only got 5 books over here. But in this case, it's a good idea to use a variable to keep track of where you are on the shelf. So what happens in C++ is we've initialized these 5 variables, these 5 integers in the array out of the 100. So the rest of the 95 will take jump values, okay? So let's say you try to access the 7th element. I don't know what it's going to be. So you need to know where to stop accessing the variables in case you declare a large size. So in that case, you need to use a variable to keep track of how many elements you currently have so that you don't overstep the boundary. Anyone have any questions here? Oh yeah, and one other solution for this problem I just explained is dynamic memory allocation, and you'll study this I think next month maybe in CS200. So if anyone has questions, you can raise your hand. No? Okay, keep on. So like I said, the array size must be known before you initialize it. Oh, and one more thing. So in this picture over here, a common misconception is that the first element will be in the first position, right? So we call the position of the element its index in the array. Okay, so a lot of people when they're introduced to arrays, they think that the index of an element corresponds to which item it is, which item number it is, right? So let's say I have 40 over here. So you can see it's the fourth item in my array, right? But its index is 3. So this is because we start the first index with 0, right? And we go all the way till array size -1. So my array size was 10 here. I've gone up till index 9, 10 minus 1, 9, right? So keep that in mind as well. So if you want to access the first element in the array, you won't use index 1, but you will rather use index 0. So you'll write array name square bracket 0 to access the element you want. And loops are often used to in conjunction with arrays. You'll see Hashim do an example with bubble sort. Basically you sort an array of integers or whatever you want, and bubble sort is the most common sorting algorithm used. Now another point over here is arrays and pointers. So Ibrahim, 1 minute, I'll stop my screen share here and take you to a C++ file. Just give me a minute.
हाँ तैमूर
नहीं गलती से बोल दिया.
वाओ
अच्छा, अब नज़र आ रही है स्क्रीन मेरी सबको ना?
हाँ
ठीक है. सो यहाँ पे मैंने एक छोटा सा प्रोग्राम लिखा हुआ है. आई हैव एन एरे ऑफ स्ट्रिंग्स, आई कॉल्ड इट लम्स, एंड इसका साइज मैंने 3 कर दिया है. सो आई हैव स्टोर्ड द 3 स्ट्रिंग्स कॉल्ड कैंपस क्लोज, another online semester big F, relatable, right? So now everyone knows, okay, to access campus closed, we just need to write the name of the array followed by its index, so 0. So I think it's pretty understood what the output will be here. If I run the program, I'll get campus closed, which is exactly what I should have gotten, okay? But however, if I just write the name of the array, what do you think will happen here? Can anyone tell me? किसी को पता है क्या होगा अब यहाँ पे? अच्छा नहीं नहीं सैयद मुकीम, पूरा नाम नजर नहीं आ रहा. सैयद मुकीम महमूद, नो नो नो, पूरा एरे प्रिंट नहीं होगा. मैं आई शो यू द आउटपुट हियर, ओके? ये देखो, ये प्रिंट हो गया, लेकिन ये हुआ क्या है? यहाँ पे हमारे पास ये चीज़ तो कहीं नहीं स्टोर हुई भी अपने एरे में. ये कैसे हो गया? So this is where the important point comes in, which is that the name of the array is a pointer to its first element या first item या to the 0th index. ठीक है, ये बहुत important point है. And because this allows you to use pointers with arrays, which is also called the pointer notation of arrays. So now if I go back to my file, you can see 0x61FEB4. This is going to be the address of campus closed, where this string is stored in memory, okay? Now, just like Ibrahim told you, I can use the dereferencing operator to get the value stored at that index, okay? So if I run this right now, you can see I've gotten campus closed. Not me, I mean COVID got campus closed, but The result I got here is campus closure. Okay. Now you might be wondering, how can we access the second and third element of the array using this pointer notation? Does anyone have any idea? I don't think so. Okay, chat में क्या आया? Using for loop. For loop से access कर सकते हैं, ठीक है, लेकिन अगर direct access करना है आपको, वो कैसे करेंगे? Muhammad Saad is saying add one. Okay, so you're saying I should do this. ये कह रहे हैं आप? अगर ये कह रहे हैं तो गलत है, देखें एरर आ गई आपको। अब ये क्यों आई है? यहाँ पे आपने लम्स को डी रेफरेंस कर लिया। सो लम्स वाज पॉइंटिंग टू द फर्स्ट एलिमेंट इन द एरे, उसका एड्रेस था बेसिकली लम्स। आपने उसको डी रेफरेंस किया, आपको वो वैल्यू मिल गई वहाँ पे विच इज़ अ स्ट्रिंग। अब C++ में आप स्ट्रिंग के अंदर इंटीजर नहीं ऐड कर सकते। सो यहाँ पे आपका प्रोग्राम कंपाइल नहीं होगा, आपको एरर मिल जाएगी। और क्या सोल्यूशन हो सकता है इसका? फराज ने बोला है, बिल्कुल ठीक बोला है, कि ब्रैकेट में डाल दें +1 को इसके साथ। अब ये क्या करेगा? आपके पास लम्स है विच वंस अगेन इज द 0th इंडेक्स ऑफ द एरे एंड यू वांट टू गो वन ब्लॉक आगे, सो यू जस्ट ऐड 1 एंड देन यू डी रेफरेंस द होल थिंग। ठीक है, सो अगर मैं डी रेफरेंस छोड़ दूँ यहाँ पे सिर्फ, आई विल गेट द एड्रेस ऑफ अनदर ऑनलाइन सेमेस्टर जहाँ भी मेमोरी में स्टोर हुआ होगा, विच इज़ जो भी है। ठीक है, but if I dereference it now, I I get the value stored at that index. ठीक है, बिल्कुल सही आई है, अल्लाह ना करे वैसे, लेकिन ठीक है। I'll go back to the slides. So यहाँ पे +1 करके आप एक एलिमेंट आगे जा सकते हो, +2 करके आप दूसरा एलिमेंट आगे जा सकते हो, and so on as far as you don't overrun the bound of the array. यहाँ पे किसी का कोई क्वेश्चन हो तो प्लीज़ पूछो। कैन वी ऐड टू अरेज? डायरेक्टली नहीं कर सकते, आपको फॉर लूप लगानी पड़ेगी। अब कह लो आपके पास 2 अरेज हैं, array 1 and array 2. So if you want to add each element of array 1 with its respective position in array 2, you can use a for loop to iterate through both of these and add them one by one. ठीक है? Will Sir Naveed section do this in class as well? कौन सी चीज़? Pointers you are talking about या arrays? अच्छा, yeah, we'll cover pointers when we get to structs, I think. Yeah, maybe Sir will cover it before that. I'm not exactly sure उसका क्या सीन है। अच्छा, तैमूर सलमान कह रहे हैं yes, ठीक है। अच्छा नहीं, वो दानिश के सवाल इसका I don't know, ना भी किए तो I think this tutorial is enough to get you started on pointers until we get to the complex topic in dynamic memory allocation and using pointers with custom data types. ठीक है, अब आगे कौन लूप्स कौन पढ़ा रहे थे? इब्राहिम आप पढ़ा रहे थे ना?
हाँ, अच्छा, so I hope everyone's clear with arrays and pointers, क्योंकि इसके बाद छोटा सा quiz होगा, तो मतलब you all should have your concepts clear.
और arrays इसलिए भी clear रखो क्योंकि you will be studying multi-dimensional arrays soon. So अगर आपको 1D array नहीं यूज़ करना आता, आप 2D array में क्या करोगे? इसलिए
Yes, precisely.
इब्राहिम कौन सा quiz? तुमने डरा दिया बच्चों को।
यार बच्चे डरते हैं तो पार्टिसिपेट करते हैं क्लास में, वरना कुछ बोलते ही नहीं। खैर, just kidding, we don't have a quiz anytime soon. I think we may have a quiz next week, but we'll announce it well before. So yes, but try and have your concepts cleared. It's just going to help you out throughout this course. Okay, so we'll now be talking about loops. From CS100, you may remember we have 3 types of loops. We have for loops. Sharjeel, you have a question?
जी, मेरा एरेस का क्वेश्चन था कि अगर एरेस के अंदर हमने एलिमेंट सारे डिफाइन कर दिए तो उन एलिमेंट्स के मतलब हम ऑपरेशन उन पर परफॉर्म कर सकते हैं? फर्स्ट करें 7 8 9 अगर हमने डाले हुए हैं तो हम 7 + 8 + 9 अगर करना है तो वो कैसे करेंगे?
सो आपको एक्सेस करना होगा, यू विल राइट ARR, ये कौन से पोजीशन पे है? 7 पे है ना? आगे क्यों चले गए बैंक, पीछे जाओ जरा। ये 6 पोजीशन पे है, अच्छा। सो यू विल राइट ARR 6, मैं करके दिखा देता हूँ स्क्रीन पे आपको, एनोटेट करता हूँ मैं। ARR 6 प्लस ARR, ये नज़र आ रहा है स्क्रीन पे आपको क्या लिखा है मैंने?
जी जी,
ये एंड पे स्क्वायर ब्रैकेट डालना भूल गया हूँ, लेकिन वो भी होगा, लेकिन
ये मुझे
यूजिंग दिस।
समझ आ गया है। मैं कह रहा हूँ कि अगर हमारे पास फर्स्ट करें बहुत ज्यादा एलिमेंट्स हैं और हमने सबका सम करना है या इस तरह कोई ऑपरेशन परफॉर्म करना है जो होलिस्टिकली पूरे एरे को ऐड कर दे, उसके लिए हम क्या करेंगे?
मतलब आप कह रहे हो कि मैं सारे 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 को ऐड कर लूँ और
हाँ जी।
एक एरे छोटा कर दूँ, बस एक मतलब उसमें एक आइटम रह जाए, ये कह रहे हो
मतलब
आप?
ये देखें जैसे ये जो वैल्यूज पड़ी हुई है ये सारी ऐड होके हमारे पास एक नंबर आ जाए, इस तरह अगर
अलग
करें
वेरिएबल में ना, वो कर सकते हो
वो
आप फॉर
कैसे
लूप
करें?
लगाओगे और फॉर लूप में आप आइटरेट करोगे थ्रू ईच एलिमेंट एंड यू विल यूज अ सम वेरिएबल, और आप हर आइटरेशन पे ऐड करते रहोगे अगला नंबर, एंड इन द एंड यू विल हैव अ वेरिएबल व्हिच स्टोर्स द सम ऑफ द होल एरे।
अच्छा ठीक है।
हाँ, अगर आपको लूप्स वाली बात से कंफ्यूजन हुई है, आई विल एक्सप्लेन लूप्स अभी। Okay, so loops are used whenever you want to execute the same block of code more than once. If you want to repeat it, अगर आपको पता है कितनी दफ़े repeat करना है, नहीं पता, if you want to repeat it until a condition, we have different loops for that. So in this course, we'll be dealing with 3 types of loops. We have for loops, while loops, and then do while loops. A for loop is used when you know how many times your code is going to repeat. And अगर आपने 10 दफ़े रिपीट करना है, the same block of code is going to be repeated 10 times. You have a while loop. So a while loop is going to be used when you want to repeat your code until you meet a certain condition. So a while loop can be thought of as a repeating if statement. क्योंकि if statement में you check for a condition, while loop में you also check for a condition, and until that's not fulfilled, you're just going to repeat the same code. A do while loop is the same thing as a while loop, लेकिन the first time you run your do while loop, it's going to run without checking the condition, and then from the second iteration onwards, it's going to check the condition. यहाँ पे किसी का कोई सवाल?
ये डू वाइल को दोबारा एक्सप्लेन करें।
अच्छा, सो वाइल लूप जो होता है, वाइल लूप में अगर आपको याद है, आप लिखते हैं वाइल और फिर कंडीशन लिखते हैं उसके अंदर, और उसके ब्रैकेट्स के बीच में आप एक कोड लिखते हैं। until that condition is met, you keep on repeating your loop. Do while loop क्या करता है? It's going to run that block of code once at least, एक दफा चलेगा, और फिर the next time it runs, it's going to check for the condition जो while loop के अंदर आपने डालनी थी। तो while loop necessarily it could run 0 times, yeah, it could run more times, लेकिन a do while loop is always going to run at least once, because एक दफा it runs without checking the condition. समझ आया?
जी जी ठीक है।
ठीक है, okay. So 2 common keywords we have when we're using loops, break and continue. So break, so both of these keywords are used to stop the execution of your current iteration, but they work in different ways. What break does is that it stops the execution of your current iteration and it quits the loop itself. तो मतलब अगर आपने for loop के अंदर आपने एक break statement डाली हुई है कि वो 5th iteration पे break कर दे loop को, what it's going to do is that it's going to run once, twice, thrice, 4 times, 5 times. It's going to break and then it's going to come out of the loop. Agar you have your break statement inside a nested loop, so only the loop in which we have the break, that's going to be exited. So if you have two for loops and your break is in your inner for loop, the inner for loop is going to stop executing, but the outer for loop is going to continue running. You have your continue keyword. What continue does is that it stops your current loop, your current iteration, and then it starts the next one. So if you have a for loop and you're running your second iteration, for example, और आप कहते हैं कि continue कर दें इसको. So when you continue, you're going to stop the second iteration and then you're going to start the third iteration. So as you can see, it goes back to the top of the loop and it begins a new iteration. It's saying after incrementing / decrementing because अगर आपको याद है for loop में you can either have I++ or you can have I-. Depending on your for loop, it will either increment or decrement. We'll usually have to use if statements to use yes, Faraz, yes you will, because break और continue हम use करते हैं जब एक particular condition आती है आपके loop के अंदर, and to check for that condition you're going to use your if statements. So as far as I remember, using break is not usually preferred by teachers. Why is that so? तो मेरे किसी teacher ने तो कहा नहीं है मुझे ये, लेकिन we usually use breaks because there come time when बहुत ज़्यादा time आता है जब you have to use a break in your loop because एक condition particular आ गई है and you don't want your loop to continue running. जैसे if I give you an array of numbers and I want you to tell me the first prime number you see in the loop, in the array, you're going to use a for loop, go from the start of the array, and then as soon as you see a prime number, you're going to break out of the loop. Because there is no point to continuing the for loop because you've already found what you wanted to find. And so you break and then go out of the loop. Will the statements before the break and continue be executed? Yes, they will, because C++ में we have line by line execution. तो अगर आपने break से ऊपर 4-5 line लिखी हैं, those will execute, and then when you see the break statement, then it's going to go out of the loop. So the 4 or 5 lines before break or continue, those will run. Could you please repeat continue? Sure. So what continue does is that as soon as you encounter the continue keyword, it's going to stop your current loop and then it's going to begin the next one as soon as it continues. So matlab, agar if you have a for loop and you're in your third iteration, I is equals to 3, and you have a certain condition jahan pe your continue keyword is used. As soon as you see continue, your loop is going to stop wahan pe, and then it's going to start again from the fourth iteration, I equals 4, because I++ ho raha hai na, so it stops the loop wahan pe, increments your counter, and then it continues the loop again. It starts the loop again. Aman, has that cleared your question? Okay. Okay. Now Hashim is going to continue. He's going to tell you guys a few common mistakes that you should look out for when you're coding. And I think he also has an example on loops. So Hashim.
Just 1 second, let me open slides.
मेरे ख्याल से हाशिम ने ये नहीं कराना था, उसका वो एग्जाम्पल ही था.
किसने कराने कॉमन?
एक्चुअली कोई भी करवा दे, मैं करवा देता हूँ.
चलो स्लाइड्स खोल लो फिर करा दो.
स्लाइड्स 1 मिनट खोल.
ओके. यार इसको स्लाइड्स भेजी भी थी, हैं इसके पास? अच्छा आ गए।
हाँ है।
स्क्रीन शेयरिंग नजर आ रहा है?
हाँ नजर आ रहा है।
अच्छा, तो दिस इज अ कोड वी हैव जिसमें हम लोगों ने एक array डिक्लेयर किया है और उसको इनिशियलाइज हमने शुरू में कर दिया और हमने एक इंटीजर सम बनाया और उसके अंदर हमने सम स्टोर किया। देयर इज अ ग्लेयरिंगली रॉन्ग इशू इन दिस, कैन एनीवन आइडेंटिफाई क्या मसला हुआ है there? क्योंकि आउटपुट आपका गलत आएगा। If anyone can see the issue, they can raise their hands and explain. Yes, Emma.
Basically, you have initialized, you have declared sum as an integer variable, but you haven't initialized its value.
Yes,
So
yes,
it
exactly.
probably has a plus value.
This is the exact issue which is here, because hota ye, and quite a lot of people did this in our lab, that they initialize sum as a iski tarah, and what happens is the junk value in the memory is assigned to sum, like bahut bada random number hota hai, and anything that is being changed wo sum usi ke andar increment kar raha hai array. So at the end of the day you will get a really wrong value which is not the one you were expecting. So usually try declaring int as something you already know और उसको पता हो कि override करना है. And if you're doing something जिसमें आपने increment करके डालना है, तो usually it's best to declare it as 0. So समझ आ गई सारों को? I'll assume yes. So moving on. Yeah. So basically what happens is कि इसमें अगेन फिर से काफी जो है ना इश्यूज होते हैं कि आपके array साइज भी जो है ना कॉन्स्ट नहीं होता ना, तो what happens is कि अगर आप array साइज चेंज कर दोगे ना, आपकी array की जो array है आपका वो भी चेंज हो सकता है, considering the fact कि आपका array is dependent on the array size. मे बी आपका जो है ना सेगमेंटेशन फॉल्ट इस तरह ना आए, लेकिन व्हाट हैपेंस इज कि आपकी जंक वैल्यूज अरे के अंदर आनी शुरू कर देती हैं, कोई जंक कैरेक्टर्स होते हैं, कोई इस तरह की चीजें होती हैं, तो वो आपने उसका ख्याल रखना होता है. सो हमेशा इट्स बेस्ट कि इफ यू डिक्लेयर द अरे साइज एज अ कांस्टेंट, नंबर 1. नंबर 2 कि आपने जो है ना इनिशियलाइज किया हो आपका सम. तो ये दो चीजें होती हैं, इनका जनरली ख्याल रखना जरूरी है अरेज के साथ, और जब भी आप किसी चीज को एक वेरिएबल में स्टोर कर रहे हैं. Makes sense? So these are the main key takeaways which you need to see. जो common mistakes usually CS100 वाले level तक होती हैं आपके पास.
Hashim. यार someone was saying if you could repeat the sum wala part, and then some of them are asking कि what if you want to change the size of the array.
Okay, so firstly dealing with the size of the array वाला सवाल, वो जो है ना आप जब dynamic memory allocation सीखोगे ना आगे जाके, वो तब आपने जाके करनी है. That's not something you need to do right now. Again the sum वाली चीज is कि अगर आपका sum 0 नहीं declared हुआ होगा ना यहाँ, तो होगा ये कि sum के अंदर एक junk value assign होगी इस stage के ऊपर. यहाँ अगर ये वाला आप केस करते हो, समझो 40,200 को इस तरह की वैल्यू आ जाती है, सही है. अगर कोई 40,200 वैल्यू होगी और आप उसमें 1 करते हो, वो ऐड करते हो चीजें, 40,201 हो जाएगी, 202 हो जाएगी, 203 हो जाएगी, इस तरह करके बढ़ता रहेगा, which is not the value you are looking for. You are looking for the final answer जो इन सारे numbers को sum करता है, not the 40,000 जो initialize होते हुए आई है. तो उस चीज का ख्याल रखना काफी जरूरी है, इसलिए हमेशा try to declare it as 0. So this is the main key takeaway from these कि आप arrays का size हमेशा constant declare करो, number 1. Number 2 आप हमेशा जो है ना int और double जिसमें आपने values use करनी है immediately, try keeping them declaring them as a fixed value, which in most cases should be 0. Is that clear to everyone? अगर है तो फिर उसके बाद we can move to an example जिसमें हम command line arguments भी discuss करेंगे, because that's an issue a lot of us are facing in the assignment. So we can also discuss that for S1 obviously. Okay, so I'll be opening VS Code, and now we'll be doing an example to sort an array. So सबसे पहली चीज मैं देखूंगा वो होगा कि मैं एक फंक्शन बनाऊंगा for which जिसके through I'll be taking the inputs. लेकिन before that I need to specify कि मेरा array size किस तरह होना चाहिए. So what I will do is कि so what I entered just now will take the inputs from the command line. सही है. जब मैं रन करूंगा ना इधर टर्मिनल के अंदर मैं उसको इनपुट दे दूंगा before running the program. वो इस तरह होगा कि I use this command len is equal to a to I or b. This is in a character array stored जो जिसके अंदर values आपके आएंगे. And what this function does is convert the character into an integer value ताकि मेरे data type का issue ना हो. So just to display you कि arguments आ क्या रही हैं मैं उसके लिए एक for loop छोटा सा लगाऊंगा. For argc is the number of arguments that will be given to a particular program. तो इस चीज का भी ख्याल रखना होता है.
Hashim, you are confusing people. वो कह रहे हैं char star star क्यों लिखा है?
Yeah, this is a format you have to follow for command line arguments. This is pertinent to the assignment 1 of S1 है. You don't necessarily need to give this. Int main जैसे पहले normally करते हैं ना उस तरह भी कर सकते हैं. I will also show an example of that. Don't worry about that. मैंने code लिखे हैं लेकिन just to show कि किस तरह चलता है ये मैं एक दफा run करके दिखा देता हूँ. I compiled this, now I'm going to run this and I gave the argument 4 जो मेरा length है. See out. So I compile this and now I'm going to run this. So yeah. So just to let me clear the output. So I compile this and now I run this. इसमें देखना कि मेरा 4 जो है ना that is the argument I'm giving to the program. Like that is the number जो मैं अपने array की length define करूँगा जिस पे. सही है. तो ये मैंने किया है. Argument 0 is the directory जहाँ की program पड़ी हुई है. Argument is the number which I gave यहाँ. सही है. Now moving on, अब हम लोग एक function define करेंगे जिसमें हमने inputs लेनी है for the array. I'll just copy paste that ताकि time कम लगे and I'll explain what happened. Okay, so for this, मैंने लिखा क्या है कि basically the parameters are that I am getting an array and I have given the length, a fixed length of that array. सही है. So I'm saying कि prompt कर रहा हूँ कि उनको एक for loop मैंने यहाँ run किया है कि क्योंकि आप array की हर index के ऊपर मैंने value store करनी है. I will run a for loop for the whole length of the array and I'll input for every individual जो आपकी इंडेक्स होती है, उसके अंदर मैंने वैल्यू स्टोर करनी है, उसके लिए ये इनपुट की मैंने लूप चलाई है। नाउ इन द मेन आई नीड कि एक मेरे पास अरे पड़ी हो, तो उसके लिए मैं करूँगा I declared an array of length जो हम लोगों ने यहाँ कैरेक्टर यहाँ से ली थी, ये वाली लेंथ, सही है। Now I'll give the input यहाँ। शो के मैं अरे मेरे पास आ गई है, मैं एक प्रिंट फंक्शन भी बनाऊंगा, वो भी आपको एक्सप्लेन कर देता हूँ। So this is my print function। again से सिर्फ मैं जो है ना एक और for loop रन कर रहा हूँ for the whole length of the array and I'm see outing everything जो उस array में पड़ी हुई है। So I'll just do यहाँ सही है। And again if I run the program here, मैं पहले फिर से compile करूँगा।
Okay, by the time Hashim is using to find the error in his own code, I would just like to explain कि जो भी लिखा हुआ है ना, people were saying confused unga bunga, जो भी लिखा हुआ है, this is just a code that he's trying to use या show you guys कि you can use command line arguments in your code. अगर आपको चाहिए, you can simply just use normal int main. You can use integers, you can use strings. ज़रूरी नहीं है you take things from the command line. In his code, he's taking things from the command line and then he's using them as variables.
हाँ, जस्ट टू ऐड ऑन, ये मैं सिर्फ इसलिए कर रहा हूँ क्योंकि जो है ना हमारी एक असाइनमेंट आई हुई है जिसमें बच्चे बार बार ईमेल करके पूछ रहे हैं कि कमांड लाइन आर्गुमेंट्स लेनी किस तरह। दिस इज नॉट नेसेसरी, आई शो यू एन अल्टरनेट वर्जन, वो कोडेड है, पूरा पड़ा हुआ मेरे पास, वो सारा कुछ सिंप्लीफाई कर देगा। लेकिन दिस इज जस्ट टू नो कि दीज आर सम थिंग्स यू नीड टू लर्न एज यू मूव फॉरवर्ड बिकॉज दीज आर नॉट टॉट इन द क्लास, क्योंकि मैंने खुद से सीखी है। दिस इज नॉट समथिंग आई लर्न फ्रॉम CS 200 या इस तरह, तो दीज थिंग्स आर इम्पोर्टेंट इसलिए। खैर अब ये चल जाना चाहिए। So I compile this, compile हो गया, I give the length 4, मेरी अब लूप 4 टाइम्स चलनी चाहिए। I give this 1 2 3 4, ये आपकी array printed आ गई है, सही है। अब now my main job is to sort the array, तो उसके लिए मैं क्या करूँगा, I'll make another void function, void sort, इसकी again arguments होंगी an array and the length of the array। अब इधर जो है आपका फिर कॉन्सेप्ट आता है आपके नेस्टेड फॉर लूप्स का, ठीक है। तो व्हाट आई नीड टू डू इज कि अब देखो अरे अगर है तो मैंने एक इंडेक्स पकड़नी है एंड आई हैव टू कंपेयर दैट इंडेक्स टू एवरी अदर इंडेक्स इन द अरे, उसी के कहाँ में ज़रूरत है स्वैप करने के लिए या नहीं करने। इसके लिए आई शो यू डायग्राम इंटरनेट पे which will show कि बबल सॉर्ट काम किस तरह करता है। So, ये देखो अब पहले आपका सबसे बड़ा नंबर यहाँ पड़ा हुआ है, इट्स C compares with the next index and C's के 5 उससे छोटा है, then it makes the swap, ठीक है। अब ये आपका फिक्स्ड है, 10 क्या हो गया, Okay, so it compares with 10 with 15. अब इसको पता है 10 15 से छोटा है. अब I proceeds forward to 15. 15 is greater than 0. It makes a swap again. क्योंकि जो है ना इंडेक्स I पे 15 पड़ा हुआ है, इंडेक्स J के ऊपर 0 पड़ा हुआ है. अब यहाँ 15 12 फिर से again it compares the two indexes and it makes the swap. सही है. Now we'll coding. So again, हम लोग दो for loops चाहिए because we need to compare two separate indexes in the array. So for in is less than n minus 1. अच्छा, so I did len minus 1 because हमेशा हमारे second last ने last के साथ compare करनी है. So I do not want a seg fault. तो इसलिए मैं एक len minus 1 करूँगा because I need to compare the second last index with the last index. So moving on, फिर मैं दूसरा for loop करूँगा जिसने next index के साथ compare करना है array को. For int I is equal to for int j is equal to 0. क्योंकि आपकी scope I की अभी भी इधर ही है, इसलिए आपने j एक और नया variable initialize करना है. This will be I plus 1. J is less than len because इसने आखिरी इंडेक्स तक जाना है and J plus plus. अब मैं चेक करूंगा if the array's index at I is less than the array's if the case के ये बड़ा है जो पहला इंडेक्स है, like for example if 1 is larger than if 2 was here and if 2 was large, बल्कि उस डायग्राम पे था. Yeah, so if index I पे ये index j पे ये 10 is larger than 5, so it needs to make the swap. अब swap किस तरह करना है वो हम करेंगे ये कि हम एक temp initialize करेंगे and we will make the swap using this temp as a temporary variable. उसके लिए करेंगे ये कि हम पहले temp में हम store करेंगे array 1 index 1 की position make the swap. उसके बाद a is equal to ar1j and we will store the value जो हमने temp में store किया back into the second index. So this should probably work. So I'll call the sort function here. And in the sorted area आके उस print हो जाएगी. So let's hope for the best. Compile हो गया. I'll go in reverse order ताकि नजर आए कि ये sort हो रहा है. And here you have the sorted group. Is this clear to everyone? Any questions?
Hashim, do you have the simplified version?
Simplified वाला भी है.
हाँ, क्योंकि because I feel like बच्चों को
हाँ चलो
they
सही
don't
है मैं
know.
वो कर देता हूँ।
Yeah.
सिंप्लीफाइड
don't
वर्जन
know.
ये है कि मैंने, हाँ सही है,
Yeah, okay.
I just took the length as a cn, मैंने arguments कोई भी नहीं दी, ठीक है, the rest of the code is the same. So if I run this, तो ये भी सही चलेगा। ये देखो लेंथ होती रहेगी 5 5 4 3 2 1 सॉर्ट हो गया, सही है। बाकी सारा कोड सेम है, सिर्फ मैंने मेन चेंज किया है ताकि कमांड लाइन की जरूरत ना पड़े। Ibrahim? Okay.
Yes.
The question is, what did I change? I removed the command line arguments from the main and I just took an input directly in the main. बस ये change किया और कुछ भी नहीं change हुआ। ये सिर्फ 2 lines मैंने extra डाली हैं और main को normal main की तरह बना दिया। You'll be getting both versions of the code, so don't worry about that.
हाशिम ये सिस्टम पॉज निकाल दो, उसकी जरूरत है।
अच्छा। ये वो मेरे snippet के ऊपर सेव हुआ था इसलिए आता है।
अच्छा okay.
तो that's it from my end. ये भी संभालो।
अब मैं क्या संभालूं बच्चों को? So I think that
Are there any
concludes.
questions? Yes.
Yeah, that
कुछ पूछना
concludes
है?
the tutorial. अगर किसी ने कुछ पूछना है, please raise your hand.
पहले ये तो बताओ, VS Code इंस्टॉल हो गया आप लोगों से, या कोई किसी को इशू आ रहे हैं?
Good question.
आ रहे तो चैट में लिख दो, अभी हम बाद में देखते हैं आपको, या अनम्यूट करके बोल रहा हूँ।
If anyone has any questions related to the tutorial, please let us know, or else we're going to stop the recording and then you can ask the questions then. So if anyone has a question, drop it in the chat. Yeah, you can raise your hand and ask. Hashim, line 41, why aren't we using ampersand?
ये मैंने डायनामिकली डिक्लेयर किया क्योंकि ऑनेस्टली स्पीकिंग मुझे याद नहीं है कि नॉर्मली डिक्लेयर किस तरह करते थे, लेकिन इसका अल्टरनेट वर्जन मेरे ख्याल से था इंट क्या था।
अच्छा, so Mukim, Hashim will upload the normal wala version LMS पे whenever he figures it out. वहाँ पे I don't think, अगर तुम्हें याद आ गया हाशिम, वरना
रेगुलर डिक्लेरेशन याद करने थे बस।
हाँ वो कर लेना तुम याद। Other than that, I'm stopping the recording, and then we can help out anyone whose VS Code is not working.